Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Get down! Baltimore!
What are they getting?
Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.
All right, welcome on back to another edition of the Baltimore Beatdown Podcast. It is Thursday night, August 18th, 2022. My name is Jake Luke, and I'm joined on my screen by Spenny Outfield. How's it going, pal?
Going quite well. Went to the Orioles game today. Saw them play a weird, wild, wet West Virginia game where they ultimately fell short at the end of the game on some weird plays. Rugi Odor bunting out, bunt pop out to first.
Bunts, by the way, in critical situations, he's always laying that bat down. It's getting to me a little bit.
Yeah, that's what he's known for sure. Very weird on that front. Austin Hayes called out in a controversial call. Cedric Mullins has a obscure end of game situation double play that was just because everyone was going to run because it was the end of the game, and the Orioles lose. But fun times regardless. Yeah, no, it was a fun game. And Rugi is, obviously he's very clutch at other times as well at the plate there, so I can't totally rag on him. But kind of a frustrating loss, especially. I didn't see where the call went wrong, but apparently there was a big controversy with that. I kind of listened to the last couple innings on the commute home, but they're still in it. What are they, probably like 2 games back now? So tough loss there today for sure. But we're here to talk some Ravens as always. So we're kind of really back in that two episodes a week, like full time here grind. And we have a game to preview. But before we get into that, we do have a couple of nuggets to cover news wise, which I know you are extremely riveted by all that's going on in Berea, Ohio with our guy Deshaun Watson. So just take it right away. And Clay's comment here, pain period, is sort of summing up that Orioles game and then summing up what we're about to go through here. Deshaun Watson suspended by the NFL for 11 games and a $5 million fine. The Ravens will see him week 15. And that was talking Deshaun Watson.
Yep, Cleveland, you're a disgrace. You sold your soul. This is not going to net you a Super Bowl, and you can deal with it. So that's talking Deshaun Watson, so we can move on.
That was talking Deshaun Watson.
That was talking Deshaun Watson. So outside of that, there's not really a ton of news to hit on. A little bit of, I guess we can touch on little Ronnie Stanley updates that are coming out. He's kind of the last major name that's still on this PUP list. It's starting to get to a point where it feels like week 1 is coming into question. So how are we feeling about this Ronnie Stanley? Will he, won't he for week 1?
I don't know. It's a peculiar situation. Last year he comes back from injury. He practices for, I want to say, close to a month, maybe 3 weeks, somewhere around there, and then plays and doesn't have an incident or an injury necessarily, just didn't play well. And, maybe the guy was in pain. I don't know. I'm not him, but sits out last year, has a cleanup procedure, and here we are, a year later after he didn't play last year, didn't play half the year prior to that. Obviously was a horrible injury, but at this point it's hard to feel confident that he is going to play week 1, let alone play at a high level week 1. He's not. And that's, what the deal is. Maybe he felt rushed. Maybe he felt, that wants to really take his time. I can understand all of that. But at the end of the day, it's really hard to imagine going from being an all-pro left tackle, franchise left tackle, $100 million left tackle. It's the biggest contract for a non-quarterback in Ravens history. And then you have that injury. You're not going to be the same. You had a severe broken bone in your, set in your push foot. Or excuse me, I think it was his right foot. Yeah, it was his inside foot. So that's going to be your set foot where you're trying to anchor and things. So it is going to be weird. And guess what? In order to get over that, eventually you will have to play. Don't want him to rush back, but he's going to have to play at some point. And when that is, we do not know.
Yeah, we certainly don't. It's becoming a little bit murkier the further we go along, and it has been a situation where it seems like the Ravens and fans have kind of just been hoping that you get pretty much anything out of him this year. If you get like even a reasonable facsimile of what he used to be, then you're in a pretty good spot. They really sort of have to hope that that's going to be the case at this point. And if not, you still got Jawan James hanging around. Morgan Moses has been signed, and then Folele was drafted developmentally, but he seems to be a little bit ahead of schedule. So there's a plan in place, which at least feels good. They certainly didn't have one last year, having to kick Villanueva over there, which was a unmitigated disaster. So contingencies are abound, but it's getting tough. So we're going to have to see what happens with old Ron Stanley. And we are rooting for him to make a comeback, because we love him. So
we certainly are. We certainly are. And they do have the depth. We have Snappy Tofu in the comments here. Feels like we actually have really solid depth to make up for a delayed Ronnie return. Exactly that. McCary, too, a guy that played some high-level tackle. So hopefully, it appears, like we said last episode, they have a sick, nasty backup offensive line that probably, was better than something they trotted out at points last year in ways. So ultimately, Ronnie Stanley will remain, I think, the true crux or the true wild card of this team. If he can come back and play at a high level, then you have a deep offensive line and you're set in many ways. So obviously hoping for him to return quickly, and I'm sure the Ravens are too. We have Clay here talking, speaking of injuries, I haven't heard much past Linderbaum having a Liz Frank injury. Is he going to need surgery to fix that? Harbaugh came on podium and said, no, it was not Liz Frank. That was incorrect. Jake went on a little diatribe last episode about how, or maybe it was 2 episodes ago, about how he thinks that was them trying to sniff out whoever's ratting things to Ian Rappaport as the J.K. Dobbins injury, all that stuff. So Linderbaum's supposed to be back tomorrow. As you're listening to this on Friday, if you're listening to
the individuals in Phoenix, which they just landed in Phoenix, as we saw from Marlon Humphrey's Twitter, something to the effect of no grass in Arizona. Gross, but continue.
Yeah, exactly. So Linderbaum should be back regardless. So yeah, a weird spot nonetheless. And it feels like, Ronnie, from what we see, and again, what you see is not always what you get. Some people post things, some people don't. Looks like he's worked really hard to get back. So ultimately, we want to see that be the case. And without him, I don't know. You're not as deep as you'd like to be.
No, you're certainly not. So they need him back. They need Linderbaum to get through this without any issues. Sounds like he's doing fine, but overall, offensive line still looking pretty good. It's a lot better than they were at this time of year, even with thinking Stanley was going to come back. So they're in a decent spot there. So that's kind of the only news out of the castle that we have to report on. One thing we probably should comment on, or at least I should comment on, because I took a little bit of a roller coaster of emotions with this story, was Hollywood Brown's comments, I guess you could say, ahead of this game. So he got asked yesterday. Once again, these reporters, I don't blame them for doing their job. I'm not a hashtag the media guy, but, going out of their way to ask Hollywood Brown over in Arizona about leaving here, that it's Baltimore yet again. And he comes out and says something to the effect of, I love it there, but I like to win games, and I like to win games where I'm involved, essentially. And let me tell you, reading that as a tweet or whatever I did, at first it sounded a lot worse than if you actually go and watch the video today, which, I don't know if the transcription was bad, but it kind of seemed like it was, because he said he was very, remained pretty complimentary of the Ravens as an organization. But he did say, like, yeah, I want to go somewhere that I'm going to produce a little bit more, which I can understand. Maybe I'm probably conflating it with the fact that he has gone on a little bit of a tweet liking spree, hating on Greg Roman and stuff, and being a little more unprofessional than he has been in some other, respects. I think he's largely been pretty professional through this whole process, but this was one that I took a little bit of a ride with.
Definitely. And dating back to after the trade, he goes on I Am Athlete or whatever it was, and essentially says that he felt uncomfortable when he's a young guy and he's a first-round pick and he's supposed to be the guy. So it's a young room and Willie Snead's not there. And when the receiver room wants him to go speak up on their behalf about something, which is common to have a kind of leader of each room. That's why I always talk about how I like having, the true veteran that's towards 30, then the prime player, then the young player, then the developing player. And if you have that in a room, you're going to have a contingency plan, all that stuff. Anyway, so Hollywood basically says he felt uncomfortable being that leader in that room and ends up going to Arizona behind DeAndre Hopkins and AJ Green and all those kinds of things. He's familiar with Kyler. He's familiar with, the Cliff Kingsbury lifestyle, I guess is a good way to put it. So, what he said was that, he wants to feel like he's a part of the win. He's a part of the production that ultimately wins and loses games. And he felt like that wasn't the case. And what if you want to read between the lines of that, what does that spell out? They don't need me, so they're not going to pay me top dollar. That's what that really says to me in the end. And the same thing with Orlando Brown. It's like he said it wasn't about money, and Hollywood never has mentioned money, but it is. In the end, you're a rookie and you want to get that second contract. You see all these other guys. And guess what? Our boy Jimmy James, whatever the hell the last name is that we flipped out on the draft pod about, the draft live stream about, he's the one that probably authored a lot of this. Hey, we can maximize your value in an offense that throws the ball as a rushing attack a little more with those heavy screens they do. It'll inflate your numbers as you go into the new market, or as you hit the market, I should say. So he's going to get paid more as a result of it probably, and that's what the players care about. Most of them, we fantasize, we glorify when we're young and we're growing up about what football players are and how much they love the game and hometown discounts, and the money's not why they play mainly, but it's a job. It is a 9 to 5 for a lot of them. We spend more time thinking about football than some of them do, frankly. It's a job. They've been doing it their entire lives. They're career professional football players. So at the end of the day, he wants to get paid more at his job and is going somewhere that'll probably pay him more or get him paid more. Better on his resume. Let's say the Cardinals' production looks better on his resume probably than it would in Baltimore. And I think that will probably be the case. I'm probably going to draft him in fantasy. DeAndre Hopkins isn't going to be there. They're going to throw him a bunch of quick screens and watch him try to go snake his way through some blocks, and Kyler Murray pushes the ball downfield well. So I think he has a nice box score season, and that's what ends up ranking players and getting players paid. If you're Anquan Bolden in the Ravens offense and the gritty run first offense back in the day, you put up 850 yards with 6 touchdowns. It doesn't look as good as someone who has 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, but maybe you were a better player. Maybe you were better at your job. Maybe you could have done those things, but that's not what you needed to win. And that's what the Ravens have told us. In John Harbaugh's era, they're not a team that really gives a shit about paying prime receivers. They never have. They've never sought one out other than Anquan Bolden. And hey, guess what? That won you a Super Bowl, but he kind of was a hashtag trademark built different kind of receiver that fit their MO a lot better. So there's my little tangent, I guess, on that.
Yeah, I kind of, and I'm interested to see like if he does sort of get this redemption that he's looking for. I don't know if redemption is even really the right word there, but I mean, you're going to an offense where Hopkins is going to be out for the first half of the year or so, I guess. And, you get in there and you get an opportunity to really light it up, which, that's good for him and all, but he's really going to have to make good on that. And he is entering into a situation that you talk about the Ravens being a good organization, and they are, and to his credit, he did, but you're going to a spot where things are not good right now with the Cardinals. Like Ben Rhodes was in the comments saying that they're a sneaky bad organization. And I think he's absolutely right. I mean, I don't think what's the owner's name? I'm trying to think, because he featured heavily on that All or Nothing show like 6 years ago, but Bidwill, I think it is.
Steve, maybe.
Yeah, Michael Bidwill, and then Steve Keim is the general manager. Bidwill seems like a good guy, but he just seems a little out of his depth at times. Then he's like giving these weird extensions to Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury during this past offseason. And then like you have all the Kyler Murray BS going on, and then you have Hollywood, getting there, and he immediately gets arrested. And like that's, I'm not like throwing shade or anything like that, but that's just kind of a tough foot to, set yourself out on there. So interested to see what that opportunity is going to look like for him in the long term.
Definitely. Shout out Michael Bidwell going to Georgetown Preparatory School in North Bethesda.
By the way, we have some breaking news.
Give it to me.
We have another talking head with some viral comments about Greg Roman and the Ravens offense. Do you want to don't look at Twitter.
Okay.
You'll probably be able to guess who it is, but guess who this is.
Robert, you set me up perfectly, because the Baltimore Ravens have doubled down again on being the most sophisticated running game in football, and they have been mowing through regular season opponents for a long time with this most sophisticated running game. My position is they will never get to championship football without a sophisticated passing game. That's not anything to do with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is a complete player that is being not trained in being a sophisticated passer. They double down again back to all the great things that Lamar does. Great. But until he gets the chance to show that he is a sophisticated passer of the football in a sophisticated passing game that is properly invested in, which they never have done, to Robert's point just a minute ago. They don't invest in it. They don't teach it. And now you ask them, why isn't he getting paid to be Patrick Mahomes? Because they haven't given him a chance to be Patrick Mahomes. So until they do, Lamar Jackson's damned because of what the Ravens are doing, not because of Lamar Jackson. I can't wait for someone to train Lamar Jackson to the sophisticated passing game. I think he'd be the greatest player in the history of the game. Yeah. But he's being held back by the Ravens year after year because they keep doubling down to this thing that Lamar Jackson is great at. No question. He's the best at that. Yeah. But it's not the championship football that they need to play, and it's not where Lamar Jackson wants to be. I want the full measure, Robert, of who Lamar Jackson is. And the full measure is not being brought forward by the Ravens. And if that's not the case, then get out and find someone who will.
All right, I want you to respond to that live, because we've never been in a position where we can actually really sink our teeth into one. So what do you think about that one?
It's more of the same. It's more of the same thing that gets regurgitated, and you watch a couple. You have Kurt Warner go break down 5 plays where the spacing was bad.
Kurt Warner, it really makes you think, like all these guys, like.
And they played in the league, so they know, and they're hip, and they watch all the tape that they don't actually watch. And it is this horrible thing. It's like there's never been a progression in their pass offense. They're doubling down on 2019. Oh, my God, not doubling down on the best season they've ever had in the regular season, the best offensive season in franchise history. Why the fuck would they do that again? Why would that be your philosophy? So, sure, I don't think fucking Roman connects the pass game, marries the run game to the pass game as well as Kyle Shanahan does, the almighty, powerful, 0-time Super Bowl winner, Kyle fucking Shanahan. I don't think that he's the best. I don't think he's an above-average pass game, play caller, executionist, whatever. They bring in fucking Keith Williams. They bring in T. Martin. It's John Harbaugh. It's not Greg Roman. That's what it is. Greg Roman is the fucking scapegoat. Again, what were we just talking about? They don't want to pay receivers. They don't pay top dollar for receivers. They don't invest their assets into or spend their assets on fucking receivers and pass game, because who doesn't believe in it? John Harbaugh. And if John Harbaugh doesn't believe in it, who else does that probably mean? Who else is bought in? Probably the GM, probably Ozzie as well. Both of your GMs of sorts, your personnel front office, they probably hire people for these market inefficiencies. And then guess who else probably is bought in? If the coach is bought in and the front office is bought in, where does that come from? Their fucking presentation they do in Jupiter, Florida to fucking Steve Bisciotti. So it is what they are. It is what they are. Are they the tone of that video, the tone that he has? Again, it sounds like people are talking, like he's talking about the New York Jets. Like they're this pathetic organization. It's disgusting disservice that they're doing when they are not an unsuccessful organization. Whatever.
I'm glad that we got to get that live, because I've never I don't think the people have seen you live react to something like that, or kind of go off on a tangent. You do your rants every now and then, but it was good to, I think it was really good to get that raw live wire.
I'm pretty tired, to be honest. And I wouldn't have gotten fired up on this podcast at all, on this episode at all, if that wasn't just, if I wasn't forced to listen to the entirety of that video. I would have turned it off after 9 seconds if I was doing it on my own fruition.
That's why I'm glad I got a captive audience here. Any guesses who that was, by the way? You probably already know.
That's the part that's really pissing me off, is that it's not Dilfer, and I can't discern who it is.
Steve Young.
Of the Brigham Young family.
This guy was a mobile quarterback in the 80s. He knows what he's talking about. Yeah. Okay. Sorry for making you go off on a tangent there. I know we got to get out of here. Let's get into the game preview. John Harbaugh saying that most of the starters not going to play again, but some of them will be incorporated in. That kind of caught my ear a little bit. So I'm kind of curious who it's going to be, because some guys are still fighting injuries. He's definitely not going to want to risk it with others, but I don't know. Who do you think he's going to want to slot in there?
I would say Patrick Queen. I'd say maybe they give Owe a couple more snaps. Maybe we see some Chuck Clark, Marcus Williams, maybe a taste of Marlon Humphrey. I think Justin Madubuike probably gets some run. Perhaps Morgan Moses takes a snap, a series or so. Rashad Bateman I could see playing a series or so. Honestly, I would hate that. That's the only one out of all those listed. The only one I don't want to play is Rashad Bateman. We could see Duvernay taking some snaps. We could see, I don't know. I think that's about the extent of it. Ricard probably, I think he was in there last week anyway. So those are the ones that come to mind ultimately. I think we see those guys play a series, or maybe some of them play a quarter or something like that.
Yeah, I'm curious if they start to mess around with the offensive line a little bit. I don't think Moses played last week, so I think maybe they throw him in there for a series as that elder statesman, get his feet wet a little bit with Stanley's uncertainty. Then again, you run a little bit of risk doing that with Stanley's uncertainty, so it's a double-edged sword there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because Lamar not playing. I don't think we're going to see him in the preseason, and that's probably for the best. But yeah, that's an interesting part of the conversation is like how they're going to approach it this year. I wrote about that a little bit today. I think it's going to come out tomorrow. Just a complete change in tone, or not complete change, but definitely a change in tone surrounding the preseason, and definitely a change in sort of pace with which and intensity with which they ramp up, not only for games, but also for practice and training camp. It seems like everything is very deliberate and it's just sort of a slow ramping up. So it's been nice to watch. It's another piece in the Harbaugh science that we've seen in the past 5 years or so. So pretty cool to see him continue to adapt himself, but getting into the game proper, what are we looking at on the offensive side of the ball? Do we want to see a Shamar Bridges breakout continue? Do we want to see one of these other young wide receivers that are unheralded make some plays? I don't know if I want them to. You mentioned this, I think, already. I don't know if I want them to play Isaiah Likely anymore in the preseason. Maybe just kind of get him out of there. What are you looking for from the offense in this one?
Yeah, I don't want Likely playing a ton for sure. A couple, maybe 3-4 series, force feed him the ball once or twice. And get him out of there. Seems like he is going to be a capable, viable option aside from Mark Andrews, aside from Rashad Bateman, and I'll throw Devin Duvernay into that mix too. So don't want him playing a ton. Caught some shit for that. People say, well, he needs to really work on his run blocking. What percentage of the development of Isaiah Likely's run blocking do you think is a result of playing in a couple series? Let's say he gets 20 snaps run blocking over the next 2 games. I would say 0.3% of his development as a run blocker this year will be a result of preseason week 2 and preseason week 3. And hey, get 0.01% better every day, my guy. But you can do that in practice. You can do that by warming up. You can do that playing a couple games, something like that, or a couple snaps, something like that. So definitely don't want to see a ton of him. I know the fans like it. Whatever. I feel like they are. The point of preseason in many ways is to discern who is going to make the roster or not, primarily, who is going to get cut, who is going to continue on. If you're not one of those guys, then it's to just get your feet wet, warm up, like we were just talking about those things. We saw him warm up. It's an away game. Maybe there's something to that. We've heard Harbaugh mention that kind of stuff a lot more than we realize, where it's like, okay, this is his first away game. Go through the motions of going into the stadium from the hotel, getting dressed in an opponent's locker room, going on the field, being in a different environment so you don't feel overwhelmed when that happens. So I get all of that stuff. I think that part of it for a player like Isaiah Likely, who is going to make the team, looks like is going to be a pretty decent rotational player minimum in terms of snaps. So you don't need to overdo it here. And for some reason, it really just clicked in my head for the first time in my life that when you draft a rookie, then that rookie goes from playing college football through basically New Year's, give or take, to immediately getting ready for the combine, working out, putting more strain in the gym than they've probably ever put on their body from January after the season directly, not really getting a break, through the combine, which is not close to the end of the season relatively, God forbid playing in a Senior Bowl or something like that. Then you get drafted ultimately. You end up going to OTAs. You get a little bit of downtime. A guy like Daniel Faalele didn't. He stayed after OTAs. And then you go into the preseason. You play in these games. And then just thinking about only the preseason games through, now it's a 17-game season. If you play in 3 preseason games, by the time you get to the playoffs, God forbid, it's game 20. So that's where the rookie wall comes from. And we always talk about the rookie wall. That's what it means. It means they're just fucking worn out because they played a 365-day football season, essentially, give or take. So just tough. So when you have a guy like Likely, this is, we're focusing on Likely primarily, but, when you have a guy like that, do you want him to get the reps? Sure, but maybe it's more valuable to keep him fresher, let him have a little bit more of a learning curve. And hey, maybe that's why the Ravens have won 21 straight preseason games. And we talk about this streak and jest. It is kind of fun to follow along over the years, but maybe that's what ends up suffering if you think about things like that. And they talk about the science, and they talk about how there's a mandatory level of intensity that they need in order to, be sustainable. We always hear Harbaugh talk about callousing and things like that. So that is probably what results in them being a fucking amazing September team under John Harbaugh, because they do ramp up so hard and so well in August and in late July that it leads to them being more prepared. But then what happens? He's not great in October. The Ravens are never good in October, very rarely, for that exact same reason. They're hitting the wall sooner. So, when do you want to peak? When do you want to get out ahead of it? I mean, have they played their best ball in January in a long time? Not really. Have they played their best ball in October in a long time? Not really. November, December after the bye week, maybe they get back in tune. So let's see if we can tweak the methodology there and peak maybe a little later, and have that rookie wall be a little bit lesser, especially if you're relying on Linderbaum and Hamilton and Likely and some of these guys to play some real snaps.
Yeah, and they seem more comfortable with that than ever right now, where Harbaugh is very careful with his words and how he talks about it, but he's also, pretty eager to go into the nutritional side of it. And he seems like he's really getting into the weeds and the science of it. He seems almost like a Formula One team principal, with how deep he's getting into the shit. And he's keeping these guys as if they're his cars, well-oiled machines, and just making sure that they're ready to endure the length of a full race, i.e. a full regular season. And I think that's a really good point that you make about September. They just come out of the gates gangbusters, and they're always 3-1 or 4-0, and then it's just they fall flat on their fucking face every October. You make a great point there, and it's so frustrating. And it's well, what can we do to avoid this? It's well, maybe let's manage our tempo and manage our pace and manage.
Maybe you take an L or two in September so that you're doing better later in the season.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe not even take an L. They're very deep this year. It's showing through in the preseason right now. Just looking through the list of positions where they have, guys 4 and 5 deep, and guys that they've drafted that are looking promising. It's pretty good in that regard. So if you're going to have to go and play a Joe Flacco in week 1, I know we joke about that. That's obviously a winnable game. And then I think, what do you have? Do you have the Dolphins in week 2? It's just there's definitely some winnable games early in the schedule. So I'm kind of okay with the idea of saying and you don't want to take a win for granted, obviously, but I'm certainly okay with the idea of ramping your way up through September as opposed to August. So I guess that is our way of covering offense. Where do you want to start on the defensive side of the ball here?
To split off before we segue into the defense, I now am seeing this Steve Young video circulating on Twitter, and it's hilarious because he's talking to, it looks like he was talking to RG3.
Yeah,
I just want to know what RG3 said, because it was probably something so he always brown noses for the Ravens. He always has their back whenever he's talking in the media, and you see him just smiling, passes the ball to Steve Young. So I'm curious to see the beginning of that, or what RG3 was saying ultimately. But moving on defensively, and I guess it's not quite all the way into defensively, but offensively as well. We want to see that offensive line continue to look like they have a really strong second unit, and the defensive line do the same thing. Those were the standout units to me last week. They were so stout up front. Tyler Huntley got some clean pockets. They were disrupting Malik Willis. They were getting after the quarterback. They were incredibly stout against the run. Just in terms of basic stuff, playing against zone running concepts, which is mostly what you see in preseason, some basic stuff, a lot of basic inside zone, mid zone, outside zone stuff, and just being able to get off the ball quickly, have your hands in a good place, have good leverage, have a good base under you, and be able to beat guys across their face, force running backs to cut back. So I'm really looking for Broderick Washington to continue his ascension. Played very surprisingly well last year, considering he had some weird off the field stuff and people thought he was going to get cut. That didn't happen. You heard Harbaugh talk highly about him last year. We've heard Anthony Weaver in little snippets. If you go watch that little Ravens Hard Knocks they released a week or two ago, saying that, you're going to be a star in this league, all that kind of stuff. So guys like Washington, Travis Jones, I wrote about, outstanding. Crawford, outstanding. We watched Michael Pierce, Brent Urban even make some plays early on in that game. And I'm really excited for also, they have Steven Means in that outside linebacker rotation who looked awesome, and they put him on the podium. And that, like I always say, they typically tell you who they are going to put forward by who they are having on advertisements, who they are having, go speak at the podium, things like that. So I think that bodes well for Means, who had a disgusting cross chop move around the left tackle to go get a sack last week, and want to see what that ends up being about.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely a lot of guys to watch here, man. You mentioned some guys that I hadn't even thought of. I mean, you got Aaron Crawford coming in after a strong week. Josh Ross there at inside linebacker. I mean, you mentioned Queen could potentially start. I'll be interested to see if they do that and kind of what his role is right now, because, we can't forget that they pursued Bobby Wagner pretty hard, and that didn't work out. And now, you don't want to say they're stuck with Patrick Queen. He's a very talented player, obviously, but they ostensibly went out to go and try and replace him a little bit. And it didn't work out, and they're counting on him now to have a really strong year. And I think obviously we're both in his camp, and, we think he's been stronger than some people have throughout the course of his young career so far. So counting on a big year from him. And, if it's not going to be him, then we're going to get a good look at some of these other inside linebackers, obviously on Sunday night. And then in the secondary, Marcus Williams, I'd be curious if he's a guy that they run out there for a series as well, just to get his feet under him, get a little bit of experience, and then maybe shut him down for that third game. And then Pepe Williams, another guy who's going to get a lot of run. He did on Thursday night, and he also got in on that punt return game, which those precious Harbaugh special team snaps are big. So a lot of things to be excited about, and haven't even talked about Kyle Hamilton, who's probably going to play a little bit more as well.
Definitely. And in true Harbaugh, form, this coaching staff's form, I think one of Harbaugh's other modus operandi is that he likes to put the ball in the player's court, which some people, I can absolutely understand the opinion of thinking, this is his way of absolving himself of any potential guilt or blame by saying, hey, do you guys want to go for it? Even though they're probably going to go for it, but it puts it into the player's will. So we hear him talking about Calais Campbell, talking about Morgan Moses at times throughout, training camp. He's probably going to say, hey, do you want to play, Marcus? It's up to you. Like, do you feel this is what you need to be ready? And considering that he's in a new system, hey, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Ultimately up to him a lot of times. That's usually how Harbaugh's rolled, especially the last couple of years. So you mentioned those things. Very curious to see. I am excited to see Hamilton continue to get snaps. He is someone that I do want to get snaps. Safety is bountiful for now. Knock on the old wood there for the Ravens. But him getting snaps, continuing to get those split safety looks, continuing to see him on the roof, maybe get tested downfield a little bit. That's what I would like to see. That's what I'm most excited about, is the idea that, hey, maybe what's the Cardinals' backup quarterback's name? Chris Strever, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Ravens legend. Chris Strever.
Is that it? Nope, Colt McCoy, pardon me. And then Trace. Wow, this is a Trace McSorley revenge game, and we had no idea. Completely forgot. So maybe Trace tests him deep.
This is just a Ravens revenge game the other way, isn't it?
It most certainly is. So hopefully we see Trace McSorley, Trace Unitas trying to test Kyle Hamilton deep. Want to see him go make some plays on balls 20-plus yards downfield. That's what would really be my most exciting thing to go back and watch after the game and break down tape of, is Hamilton playing free safety in a middle-of-the-field close kind of look, and backpedaling, flipping his hips, running, and going to attack the ball at the catch point. So that would get me real horned up. You mentioned Pepe Williams. Something that stuck out to me last week regarding him was, I just don't think this is the player he's ever going to be. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't want to put a ceiling on him. He hasn't played a real snap yet, but doesn't have long speed. I think he's awesome in between the numbers and quickly and for the first 4 seconds of a play, but guys just consistently running away from him. So he needs to be able to disrupt them at the stem and prevent them from running away from him a little bit more effectively. So looking for him to get his hand on some guys.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else on this defense that you want to touch on before we get rolling?
Definitely. I think that Josh Ross, linebacker, played a pretty strong game, got his hand on a football as well, and want to see what he continues to do. We want to see Geno Stone here. We want to see a lot of fun things. The receivers we didn't get into a ton, obviously. Just at the end of the day, all we're going to say about that is who's going to go make plays. And if it's Shamar Bridges again.
How about a little Kevon Seymour bounce back? He had some strong moments last year. I was disappointed to see him get lost.
They seem to like him a lot, too.
Yeah, I think they do. So I'd like to see him play pretty well on Sunday.
Definitely. So, whoever's going to make plays, if Shamar Bridges looks like he looked last week, he's on this team and probably going to be in the rotation. So I would assume if he comes up big at all, then he is pretty much a lock. I would definitely say keep your eye out for the special teams special teams plays that he makes. I ranted myself so hard it's my own Freudian brain here. So want to see those special team snaps, and if he makes plays there, if the Ravens are punting, if the Ravens are on kickoff, look out for big Shamar Bridges. and see if he makes a couple plays. I think that's what could really go a long way into locking him up and maybe finding himself a role. And hopefully they integrate him and guys like Benjamin Victor into the offense a little earlier on in the game, so they can get competition against, the B guys instead of the C guys, and go through some stuff like that. We have Yuri here who said, how about Anthony Brown? He beat out Brett Hundley, the Ravens, longtime backup quarterback, according to Dov Kleiman. But Anthony Brown, he's the worst quarterback in college football last year in a terrible offensive system that made Justin Herbert look like very incompetent, and comes to the Ravens, who have a system in place for mobile quarterbacks like him, and looked pretty sharp last week. So definitely a lot of good things to see.
Yeah, for sure. So unless that's all you got, I can go ahead and get us out of here.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to tonight's preview show. Touched on a lot of things, went very deep into the Deshaun Watson situation if you missed it, so you want to listen back to the pod on that. Talked a little bit of Hollywood Browns comments, talked some Ronnie Stanley uncertainty. We, of course, previewed the game. We also had the live reaction to the Steve Young epic rant where he takes down the Ravens and their front office and John Harbaugh and Greg Roman. So you won't want to miss it at the top of the hour. But actually go back and listen to that. It was a pretty thrilling moment for me to be able to break that to you in real time. So that's the show. Thank you guys for listening as always. Tell your friends about the pod. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple. You can leave, I think you can leave them on Spotify now too. So leave them wherever you find them. We're getting geared up for the season. We're really back in the swing of things now. So it's a good time to be a listener, and you want to share that joy with everyone you know. And you can also share it with yourself. And you can share us around on social media by following the show at Podcast Beatdown. I am at Jake Luke. That's LOUQUE. Spencer is at Ravens for Dummies. That's the number 4 in the middle there. And thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you again. We'll see about a game recap on Sunday night. We might be able to just hop in the studio and do it right after. We couldn't last time because of some complications, i.e. Going and having a drink afterwards, and then it was too late. We'll figure it out next time. But just stay tuned for a recap. Then we'll have another preview for week 3, and then it's the regular season after that. So everybody get excited. We'll talk to you again soon, and thanks for listening.
See ya.
Arrivederci.
Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age?
Get down!
Baltimore!
What are they getting? Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.